Welcome to the Day's Adventure Podcast. I'm your host, David Visser. Today is episode 7 of the Woven in Courage series. January 1945, the final winter of World War II. A season so cruel, it carved itself into the memory of a nation. The rivers had frozen, the trains had stopped, the skies were gray, and so were the souls of those barely surviving. In the Netherlands, they called it the Hunger Winter. But this wasn't a season, it was a reckoning. In the pages of my grandfather's journal, the ink runs colder now, the words slower, heavier. Food was vanishing. The cold was not just outside, it was inside every home, inside every body. Between January and April of 1945, more than 20,000 people died of starvation in the Western Netherlands. In Groningen, it was no different. City dwellers, desperate, walked for miles into the countryside to trade heirlooms for a few potatoes. Children collapsed from hunger on icy streets. Bread was a distant memory. But this famine, it wasn't an accident. It was engineered. In retaliation for a Dutch railway strike meant to support the Allied advance, the Nazis cut off food and fuel transport to the western provinces. Barges were seized, train lines were dismantled, and just like that, a modern European country was plunged into a medieval starvation. My grandfather's town, his world, was caught in the middle. He was 22, already evading forced labor conscription, already moving in the shadows, and now already trying to help others stay alive in a world that was collapsing around him. From the journal's 12th page forward, everything changes. The tone is sharper, the stakes are higher. We begin to see not just a witness to history, but someone playing a role within it. The coded Bible verses return, strange visitors arrive in the night, and soon the pages begin to bleed with danger. There's a shootout. A collaborator dies, and my grandfather, he runs, but not alone. What you are about to hear in this episode is a story not just of hunger and survival, but of defiance. A network of resistance we're now certain he was part of, Group 2000, aligned with the LO, the national organization that helped people in hiding. A resistance built on secret messages, secret meetings, and incredible courage. Welcome to episode 7 of Woven in Courage. Let's begin. As the frigid grip of January 1945 tightened its hold on the Netherlands, the once vibrant streets of Groningen felt eerily silent. The air was thick with despair, and the gnawing pains of hunger became an unwelcome companion for many. This was the heart of the Hunger Winter, a period that would etch deep scars into the soul of a nation. But how did it come to this? The roots of this devastating famine were entangled in a complex web of war and resistance. In September of 1944, hope flickered as the Allies launched Operation Market Garden, aiming to swiftly liberate the Netherlands by seizing key bridges. The Dutch government, in exile, sensing a turning tide, called for a nationwide railway strike to cripple German supply lines and aid the advancing Allies. Approximately 30,000 railway workers heeded the call, bringing trains to a standstill. However, the operation faltered, and the anticipated liberation stalled. In retaliation, the German occupiers imposed a stringent embargo on food and fuel transports to the western provinces, including Groningen, plunging the region into a deepening crisis. The winter of 1944 to 1945 was exceptionally harsh. Canals and rivers, once bustling arteries of transport, froze solid, severing vital supply routes. Agricultural yields had already suffered due to years of conflict, and now, with transportation paralyzed, what little food remained couldn't reach those in desperate need. The German blockade tightened its stranglehold, and the specter of starvation loomed large. Turning to my grandfather's journal, this period was hauntingly sparse. The ink, once flowing with daily observations, now merely whispered the struggles of survival. One entry from mid-January reads,
"Cold seeps into the bones. Bread gone. We trade memories for morsels."
In those few words, a world of suffering unfolds. Family heirlooms, cherished keepsakes, all exchanged for scraps of food. The value of material possessions diminished, overshadowed by the primal need to survive. The famine's grip was relentless. Daily rations dwindled to a mere 400 to 800 calories, insufficient for even the most sedentary existence. People scoured the frozen earth for anything edible. Tulip bulbs, normally destined to bring color to spring gardens, were boiled into a bitter, starchy gruel. Some resorted to eating sugar beets or even sawdust mixed with water to quell the relentless hunger. While despair hung thick in the air, the human spirit flickered defiantly. Communities formed clandestine networks to share what little they had. My grandfather, though weakened, joined others to covertly raid German supply lines, risking everything for a sack of potatoes or a few loaves of bread. His journal notes,
"Nightfall. We moved like shadows. The risk is great, but so is the hunger."
Beyond the immediate struggle for food, the war raged on. In January 1945, the Allies were making strategic advances. Operation Blackhawk commenced on January 13, aiming to clear German troops from the Ruhr Triangle, a region straddling the Netherlands and Germany. British forces, battling through snow and fortified positions, sought to push the Germans eastward, inching closer to liberation. However, the Germans were not passive. On January 1st, they launched Operation Bonaparte, a desperate attempt to cripple Allied air forces in the Low Countries. Despite achieving tactical surprise, the operation depleted what remained of the Luftwaffe's strength, marking a hollow victory that hastened their decline. For the Dutch people, these military maneuvers were distant echoes. Their immediate battle was against the cold and the ceaseless hunger. By February, the death toll from starvation and related illnesses was mounting. Yet, even as bodies weakened, the will to resist remained unbroken. In the shadowed corners of occupied towns, whispers of coordinated efforts grew louder. The newspaper Het Parool, a resistance newspaper my grandfather mentions many times, and the work of the LO, a national organization dedicated to aiding those in hiding, intensified its operations. It's within these murky depths of resistance that my grandfather's path becomes intertwined with Group 2000, a clandestine network committed to defying the occupiers. But the journal's quietest moments sometimes say the most.
Klaus came and left a verse. I passed it on to D.S. Lemire's. I waited until the lantern blinked once, then twice. Only then did I walk.
To anyone else, this might read like a peaceful rural antidote, a walk between ministers, a verse shared. But not here, not in the winter of 1945. Klaus and D.S. Lemire's were ministers in name, yes. But in reality, they were resistance couriers, preachers of the gospel by day, operators in the underground by night. Their verses, encrypted messages, orders, drop points, enemy positions, and my grandfather, he was the link between them.
Venema and Kolker came by. I stayed still. They waited. I stayed still.
Venema and Kolker, known collaborators, the kind who sold out their neighbors for rations or for the promise of safety, the kind who led Germans to hiding places. Their names were poison in the village, and they knew something. They lingered too long. My grandfather, just a wall away, dared not to breathe. But it didn't end there.
Bacher was with me. We waited until we couldn't. They turned. We ran.
Men pursuing them, armed. One of them, Osterhoff, a known NSB loyalist, shouted something, raised his weapon, and then...
A shot. One only. Osterhoff fell. D.S. Lemire's in the shadow behind him.
D.S. Lemire's, the minister, the courier, the man who spoke in verses. A man of courage, a resistance fighter. This was not just a chance encounter. This was proof. The messages, the names, the timing all match records of the LO and Group 2000 operations in Groningen in early January of 1945. We're beginning to see it clearly now. My grandfather was no passive observer. He was in it.
We kept walking. The snow didn't take the blood. It just covered it.
This is war in the shadows, where ministers carry pistols and Bible verses carry life or death. We'll never know how many more he delivered, how many warnings he carried, but with each name, each coded verse, each act of quiet defiance, we get closer. And soon, we come to something even darker, an execution, a betrayal, and a plan that nearly cost him everything. Stay with us. January 1945, the cold had deepened and the hunger grew sharper. The food was gone, supplies were frozen or spoiled. Children cried themselves to sleep, their bellies aching. Mothers boiled tulip bulbs. Fathers scavenged frozen turnips, risking arrest. And yet, people resisted. They delivered messages, they passed illegal papers, they hid others, and they hid themselves.
No food today. I spun wool and hid in the boat. Kolker passed by. I stayed still. January 8th, 1945.
That simple sentence carries so much weight. Staying still meant more than silence. It meant fear. It meant danger, because someone had come, and that someone was Kolker. Kolker, a name written with such consistency and dread in the journal. We know that he was a collaborator. From the archives of the NIOD Institute and the Netherlands National Archive, his name is etched with the collaborators, possibly a local Virader who scouted young men for forced labor and identified resistance fighters for the Nazis. The fear wasn't just from neighbors like Kulker. It was also from the dreaded Green Police. These weren't your average soldiers. The Green Police were part of a Nazi paramilitary force. They wore green uniforms and enforced racial laws, hunted resistance fighters, and helped round up Jews. In the Netherlands, they worked alongside the Gestapo and the SD to crush any opposition with brutality. Their presence meant arrests, torture, and death.
I did not move. The footsteps passed. I prayed. January 9th, 1945.
Even as fear stalked the streets, a small miracle lived in a wooden cage.
The rabbits are still alive. I clean their straw by candlelight. Enough for stew, but I'll wait. Someone else might need it more. January 13th, 1945.
Rabbits, hidden, fed in secret, bred as food source. Not just survival, but sacrifice. He could have eaten them, but he didn't. He waited. This small act of resistance, to share rather than to consume, to care rather than to hoard, stood against everything the Nazis tried to do.
They got him. Barabbas. He tried to run. He had a list. January 15th, 1945.
Barabbas Osterhoff. The name chills. We also know Barabbas was a collaborator. His name is also etched in the NIOD and the National Archives. Someone feeding information to the Nazis. And that day, someone decided he wouldn't do it again.
There was shooting. Minister Hoekstra. I ran. They shouted. January 15th, 1945.
Minister Hoekstra, a name that echoes through the pages, a man of religion and a man of the resistance. He didn't just preach from pulpits. He was carrying coded messages, helping Jews and young men escape forced labor. And, when cornered, he didn't hesitate. The list that Barabbas carried was probably a kill list, and my grandfather, along with other couriers, could have been next.
We escaped through the alley by the canal. I dropped the Bible in the snow. The verse circled was Isaiah 43:2. Journal entry, January 15th, 1945.
When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. This verse, another clue, because we know now that these Bible verses were more than just prayers. They were coded messages used by Group 2000 and the LO, a way to share routes, contacts, warnings hidden in plain sight. At this same moment, the Germans were in retreat. The Allies had taken most of Belgium. The Battle of the Bulge was winding down. And on January 1st, 1945, the Germans had launched Operation Bonaparte, a desperate Luftwaffe airstrike meant to crush the Allied air power. It failed. The German line was faltering, but the Nazis lashed out harder than ever in the Netherlands, particularly in Groningen, where resistance activity had surged. They executed suspected fighters without trial. They punished villages, and they tortured for information. Still, the network held. This was not a symbolic resistance. These were real guns, real deaths, real escapes under gunfire. My grandfather was not just a witness, he was a courier, a lookout, a thread in the web of Group 2000 and the LO. And in that frozen January, as rabbits huddled in a cage and a verse froze in the snow, he ran with a message. He ran for his life. And next time, in episode 8, we'll go deeper into betrayal, into more names, into what happened after the collaborators fell. People close to my grandfather being captured or killed. We will relive some of the desperate moments, stories of sabotage, and a growing resistance. Because the war wasn't over, not yet, and the cost of resistance was just beginning. So join me in episode 8 as we continue this incredible journey. That's it for this episode of the Day's Adventure. Remember, stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop chasing the next great adventure. The world is full of wonders, and your next journey is just one episode away. To keep the adventure alive, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video versions and exclusive behind-the-scenes content. Want more? Hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll never miss the next thrilling episode. The world's waiting. See you next time on the Day's Adventure.